And good afternoon from Philadelphia. Frank here with yet another episode of UFO News Network Sunday. And it's been an interesting couple weeks since I last did a show. A couple things have happened. And we're going to get to the really interesting thing that happened within the last week. We've got a specific individual named to oversee the Pentagon UFO, as I like to call them here, or UAP task force. So we're going to get into some detail on all that. But first, let's go back in time a little bit and take a look at the most recent comments of the President of the United States. He was on the Fox Business Channel with Lou Dobbs about 10 days ago now. Let's listen in on his comments and provide a little bit of analysis after we give this the minute and a half where he was asked by Lou Dobbs about UFOs. Let's go to that now.
And your administration, you promised would be transparent, and you have done your level best to do that. Despite the deep state's efforts to bury everything about as deeply as they could. But I've got one question as we conclude here, because actually a lot of my friends are very concerned about what the federal government is doing when it comes to UFOs. So if I could just ask you, are you going to commit more resources to exploring UFOs and open the documents to the public?
Well, I think you're probably in this country, you're the UFO expert. So I'm going to be totally guided by the great Lou Dobbs, and I will tell you that I'll do whatever you ask me to do, including total transparency. And I got to tell you, there's probably some pretty good transparency needed there. There's no doubt about that.
Well, Mr. President, I couldn't have asked for a better answer. Thank you so much, and I'll be calling your office soon to get that underway. It's been great talking with you, sir, and we appreciate your time, Mr. President. Great to have you with us.
It's my
President
great
Donald
honor.
Trump.
You've done a fantastic job.
Thank you, sir.
Well, there you go. Hopefully Dobbs does follow up and says, dump it all. That's what we really want to see here. But again, as always, Trump pretty consistent when he is asked about it. Sort of lighthearted, not really ripping the UFO subject or anything along those lines, but doesn't express deep concern about it. Mentioned, obviously, something that we like. We should have some greater transparency on the subject. Certainly, I agree with him on that issue, and I think most of you UFO nuts out there, like myself, feel the same way. We do want to know more about what's going on with all this. And again, pretty lighthearted about it, joked around a little bit, said that Dobbs is the guy he's going to listen to. I kind of doubt that. I think he was just joking around a little bit, obviously. But that was his comment there. Again, pretty consistent with what he's been saying. Usually keeps it kind of light about the UFO subject without really denigrating it in any way, shape, or form. So we kind of like that. We don't know exactly what's going to happen over the next few months, but we did have a very significant development to happen this past week, and I want to go into some detail about all that right now. This week, the Pentagon announced that Deputy Secretary of Defense David Norquist will help oversee the UFO task force. Now, this is not really a new task force, as it was already mentioned in the Senate Intelligence Committee's request for a report from this task force. So apparently, Norquist is, the way I'm reading all this, Norquist is just being named to kind of oversee this task force that's already in existence. So it's expected to be officially unveiled in the next few days, so that might come about this week, and we might get some more details in terms of what's actually going on. But the quote adds here, previous efforts to look into what the Pentagon dubs unidentified aerial phenomenon were led by the U.S. Navy, as many of the documented encounters involved their aircraft. And then the next day, there was an official immediate release from the Department of Defense Defense Department, establishment of Unidentified Aerial Phenomena Task Force. Again, this is something that we know is already pre-existing, but apparently Norquist is being sort of added to the team to sort of oversee this. And let's go to this. Let's take a closer look at David L. Norquist. He is the United States Deputy Secretary of Defense, and he has an exceptionally interesting background. Now, one little sort of a family connection for this guy is he is the brother of Grover Norquist, who is in conservative political circles here in the state, a reasonably famous guy, very much anti-tax, keep government spending down, very much sort of a budget hawk politically, has never seemed to be from the conservative side of things, involving really supporting any kind of social conservatism, which is sort of another wing of a conservative thought here in the States. So sort of like the religious right, those types of folks. He seems more, at least Grover does, the brother does, much more interested in the sort of the nuts and bolts, the spending, the waste, that sort of thing, very much against that. And David Norquist seems to be cut from the same cloth, too. The reason why I think that is worth mentioning is we have heard talk about this Collins elite segment within the Defense Department, within the Pentagon, very much right-wing religious types who have looked at the UFO phenomenon as demonic in nature, and have given at least the fellow who preceded Lou Elizondo and his job kind of a rough ride out regarding his interest in Skinwalker Ranch and so on. So that doesn't seem to be playing into any of this. This seems like a pretty straightforward, as straightforward as politics and government can get, but it seems like a pretty straightforward nuts and bolts. Let's take a look at this issue. So let's take a little bit of a look at the resume of Norquist. He was the chief financial officer at the Department of Homeland Security from mid-2006 to the end of '08. And basically, he had to leave that job over there. He was a Republican guy. So when Obama came in, he was out over there at the Homeland Security, went back into the private sector. And now with the Republican as president, with Trump, he's back in, and he's at one point the Undersecretary of Defense or the Comptroller. As Undersecretary of Defense, Chief Financial Officer, he oversaw DOD's first ever department-wide audit of $2.7 trillion in assets, discovered major flaws but no major cases of fraud or abuse. Again, very much kind of a money guy, an accountant basically by trade. Not necessarily a problem with that. I'll get into that in a little more detail about that as we finish up here. And then Norquist has pledged to shake up defense budget and place high priority on funding research and development of cutting-edge technologies like hypersonics and artificial intelligence. So he's obviously not a scientist. He's sort of an accountant, but he does see benefits to hypersonic technology, and of course that's right up the alley of the UFO stuff. And then of course with so much talk about unacknowledged special access programs and how much money is being spent on some of that stuff, that might also be of some interest to him. So yeah, he is an interesting guy. I have seen comments that are sort of denigrating this particular move. Yeah, he's just an accountant. Well, again, I don't think that's necessarily a big deal, and I'll explain why. Basically, nobody's an expert in every field, and if you're the accountant, and you happen to be overlooking this, then you can go out and you can get science guys. When the Deputy Secretary of Defense asks you as a scientist, hey, what about this? What about that? Well, you're going to give him an answer. And conversely, if more of a science-based guy is in the same position and he needs some backup on the numbers, on the accounting, you go out and you get yourself an accountant. So I don't think that is necessarily a big deal, and maybe a good thing because he does have these interests. He is, I would think it's safe to say he is a budget hawk, and he is interested in hypersonics, so he might well be a very good choice and a very effective choice to oversee this UAP task force. Now, Really important question here is why? Why do they feel the need to have somebody oversee this already existing task force? And there could be a few reasons. One of them, of course, is somebody is very, very interested and somebody wants this to happen. Before I get into more detail on that, I've seen some other comments made by some named researchers in the field that you don't know how government works. Well, that is a gross oversimplification, but one of the ways that government absolutely does work is because something happens because somebody in government wants it. So there are only so many choices. This guy only has so many bosses here. Basically, he would answer to the Secretary of Defense and the President himself. So there's only two people above him. So, who wants this? Does he want it? Is he interested enough in all this to say, hey, I want to oversee this thing? He took the initiative and said, I want a piece out of this. Well, that could certainly be the case. But if not, only two people told him to do it. And one is the Secretary of Defense, Mike Esper, or the President of the United States himself, Donald Trump. Another possibility would, of course, be the initiative on all this is coming from the Navy. We're getting nothing from the Air Force. It could be somebody complained from the bottom up. Somebody saying, look, the Air Force is not helping us at all. They're dragging their feet. These kind of things are historically known, that there are these inter-service rivalries and difficulties and lines drawn and stovepipes developed where between the branches, they just don't want to share information. It could be that somebody in the Navy who's looking at this and feeling that they're not getting the necessary cooperation from the Air Force is going upstairs and saying, hey, we need some help on this. The Air Force isn't giving us anything. That's certainly a possibility too. So there are definitely a few interesting things in play in all this. Now, a little bit more on Norquist's background. This is from a testimony before Congress looking to shape up budget, sharp eye on R&D. This is an older article. Norquist, during his testimony before a friendly Senate Armed Services Committee likely to fast-track his nomination, reiterated the areas where the gap between the U.S. and rivals China and Russia is most notable, including hypersonics, artificial intelligence, and cyber. But there's a but. One of the challenges that is facing the department, even as we maintain readiness and the right force structure size, is to ensure that we are investing in those cutting-edge technologies that not only are just advances to warfare, but may change dramatically the way warfare is fought, he said. So this is a guy who does seem to have some interest in this. He may have jumped in. He may have been asked to jump in. He may have been told to jump in. We don't know for sure. But he's a guy who does seem to have some on-the-record interest in subjects that this UFO topic does sort of have some overlap with. So there's all that. Okay. Now, one thing about Norquist is that he is a political appointee, and Trump may not be in office come January of 2021. He may get voted out. And if he does, well, then that means he goes. He's gone. So whatever interest, whatever expertise he's developed, that goes with him. And there's going to be a new person in charge of this, a new Deputy Secretary of Defense who's going to be appointed by the only person who really has a chance of beating Trump, and that's, of course, Joe Biden. One little bit of political news in the last week. He did nominate Kamala Harris. I'm sorry, I almost said Paula Harris. Kamala Harris as his vice presidential nominee. One interesting little thing about Harris, who's the senator from California, is she is a member of the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence. So obviously that request for a report signed off on by Rubio, and likely also a catalyst behind that, Senator Mark Warner from Virginia, who's also up for re-election for his Senate seat. Haven't seen any polls to see how he's doing, but at least she's been briefed. She's in on all that. And if there is a change in the Oval Office come November, then we will see how that goes. But it's looking right now as if we may have a few really interesting months ahead of us. And we will see what happens. That is really about, one last thing, one tool in the toolbox that all these people have in terms of getting to the truth, all these people in government have in terms of getting to the truth. There is some precedent for, for declassifying material, for waiving security oaths, for that kind of thing. It happened in the 1990s with the Roswell report from the United States Air Force. So it's basically on page 18, and if you look at it, team members all had the requisite security clearances for classified information and had the authority of the Secretary of the Air Force to declassify any classified record they found that might be related to Roswell. So that kind of thing can be done. If there are some stovepipes there that are sort of squirreling away information, somebody with enough authority can absolutely positively say, hey, we want to know about this. We're waiving security clearances. We'll declassify information. We'll do a number of things to get at the truth and maybe make it public. We will see about all that. So that is really about it. A relatively short show today. Not a whole lot happened, but I do think it's important and interesting to go through the Norquist appointment to oversee the task force. That is something that I think is a real positive. The clock is ticking. They don't necessarily have a whole lot of time to get much done. We will see what happens with all that, and we'll be back with you as soon as more comes up, as soon as there's something else to talk about. Maybe the formal announcement and some detail that's provided within that context. Maybe they'll actually take some questions on all this. It would be nice to see. It would be nice to see a Deputy Secretary of the Defense standing behind the podium in front of a press conference and getting some good, solid questions about all this. And if that happens, well, that will be quite interesting, quite historic. Thank you very much, and tune in next time. Sounds like somebody's doing some yard work outside, so I got to go. Bye.